because I do love churches, including our beautiful pulpit. I do. I love the physicality of churches. From the Safeway on a hill that I was raised in, if you want to know what I mean, go visit the Berkeley Church, to this older, magnificent box with a triangle on top. I think I would have come to love UUP pretty quickly, but walking in to this building for the first time did accelerate the process. I love churches, and whenever I travel, I like to go visit churches, sit in the pews, maybe imagine myself behind the pulpit, especially those big high pulpits in New England. So, when I was given the opportunity to spend some time in Italy last fall, this love of churches plus, Italy and the high Renaissance meant that I spent a lot of time in some really fancy churches. And at first, it was quite literally awe-inspiring. How do they do that? How did they do that? In a time before machines and electricity, how did they build these marvelous edifices? How did they get all this marble and make this literal monument to their faith? How did they do that? And then, after the third or fourth church, I wonder why they did that. That's a lot. It's a lot of marble. Do we really need quite that much marble? Like every third block? And all that gold and all those paintings, that one of them is so amazing, and 52 of them, they all start to kind of merge together. Wonder why they did that. Which sort of then led to, I wonder what they could have done if they hadn't been doing that. I wonder how many hundreds and thousands, or maybe even hundreds of thousands of people spent their entire lives chiseling marble and gilding altars and drawing paintings, and what else might they be doing with their one wild and precious life? And then I started kind of grumbling about what all those people could have been doing if they hadn't been making monuments to one person and one church. And in the course of 2 or 3 afternoons, I moved from awe to what is wrong with you people? And I like to think that I am advanced in the art of jumping to judgment, but actually I think a lot of us are pretty good at moving from, that's not for me, to why is it for you, to what is wrong with you? And sure, it was over something fairly unimportant, my opinion about marble and gilt, but actually the history of the Christian church is one in which how we decorated often led some pretty serious consequences. Who got to decide what it looked like to worship God and how we might do it differently was not something everyone agreed on, and it wasn't something that when they disagreed peacefully. In 8th century Byzantium, there were people who went around breaking the icons. That's where we get the word iconoclast, to break an image. And the thing is, once you start breaking images, it's not actually that far of a leap to trying to break the people who made the images. Throughout the history of the world, people have fought about how we might best represent that which is holy, fought about whose ideas were best. And I get it. Faith is important. We're talking about the most important thing in people's lives. But I actually don't think it's just because it was faith. I think it's because we as people have a very hard time imagining that other people could be offered the same set of facts and in good faith come to a vastly different conclusion than the one that we have come to. And so it is easy to assume that they are not acting in good faith. And sometimes that's true. But our track record as a human species of deciding who's acting in good faith and who is not great. We privilege people who look like us and sound like us even when they are acting in terrible faith. And when people are different from us, we are more inclined to believe that they are just doing it. Why? Why? To make us unhappy? Because secretly they think it's fun for us to be upset? Oh, that sounds familiar. We have at different times in the course of human history been better or worse about assuming that people are acting in good faith. And now is a time where I think many of us are finding it harder to believe that other people are just doing their best. It feels more and more, I think, like we don't know each other. Like we don't know all of our fellow citizens. Is that just me? A year ago, right after the presidential election, I got up here, new to this place, and told you what we were going to talk about for the coming year. I told you we were going to talk about the long history of struggle and the ways that we could find inspiration there. And I think we have done that some in the past year. I told you we were going to talk about our theology of a love so big that none can be outside of it. And I think we've done that too. I talked about how we would talk about our current role in the world in a fight for justice. And I think we have talked about that and we have started to move towards living that. And then finally I got to this, the hardest question for me, which is how do we as a people grapple with the fact that half of our country believes something so vastly different than what we believe is right and good? How do we engage with the fact that we find it almost impossible to assume that our fellow citizens are acting in good faith? And how do we grapple with the fact that we know them so little that we were surprised? And I said, that one is gonna be the hardest and might take a while. And it turns out I was right. And I confess, I am still not certain of the answer to those questions. It is the hardest one to answer. Look, we've been fighting fascism for eternity and we'll keep fighting is exhausting to think about, but not confusing. We have to stand by people who are being hurt. It is sometimes difficult to live, but not hard to know what to do. But people I know and love have made a choice that is incomprehensible to me. That one is hard. And it's hard because it is hard to not understand something. I've known a lot of Unitarian Universalists in my time, and we are a people who like to know what's going on. To have something that is beyond our ability to understand is hard. And it's hard because we are faced with the pressing urgency of the reality of our world. When there are protests to attend, immigrants to defend, trans kids to comfort, this feels like one more thing. And honestly, maybe that's the biggest thing. This feels so freaking unfair. We have to grapple with all that is wrong with the world. We have to show up for our neighbors. We have to fight against people losing health care. We have to mourn the loss of lives in other countries because we can't be bothered to help. We have to grapple with what it means to be at war and the fact that our streets are militarized. And also, you want me to think about some people's feelings? Are you kidding me? I have better things to do with my one wild and precious life. I'm kind of tempted sometimes to stay there. I've got work to do Let that be someone else's problem. But here's the problem. Life is not fair. And demanding it be so, and only choosing to act in the ways that feel fair to us, has never changed the world. It's never even changed a light bulb. It's not my turn. Grown-ups know that there is a difference between what is fair for our individual selves and what is needed for the community. And the world is not going to get any better just because I would prefer not to think about something. So there are reasons of practicality that we need to engage with our neighbors. But there's also a reason of theology, a thing we do have in this Unitarian Universalist tradition, try as we might to pretend that is not the case. Our forefathers didn't agree on much, including the fact that there might possibly be some foremothers as well. But here's what they all agreed on. We are not a people who separate the saved from the damned. We are not a people who separate out sheep and goats, redeemed and unredeemed. Fun as that might be. Did you know that in old Puritan churches, sometimes the minister would stand at the front, look at the gathered congregation and go, redeemed, 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 unredeemed, redeemed, redeemed? That sounds fun. Sounds horrifying. What must it have been like to sit there and wonder if this morning was the morning you were good enough? Good enough to be part of this community, good enough to be loved by God. We are a people who do not separate out the sinners from the damned. We do not believe anyone is outside of the love of the human family, including the people you're thinking of right now. There is not one person who we give up on. And to say you're just acting in bad faith is to give up on someone. To say you don't care what happens to other people is to give up on someone. We are not people who give up on any single member of the human family, which means we have to try to understand. It's not the only thing we have to do. We also have to show up at the protests and call our legislators and write healthcare companies to say, please don't pre-comply about taking gender-affirming care away from kids. That one right there is an action item right now. Ask me how after the service. There's so much work to be done, and it feels freaking unfair to add one more thing on top of it. But the world's not going to get better because we bury our head in the sand. The world is not going to get more fair because we yell about how it isn't so. And we are not going to be the people we claim to be if we, like Elbert, can't approach the world with a little curiosity. This work has just begun, but it has to continue. It is our faith work as well. So, let's see what we can do. May it be so. Amen.